The first step of making this jig is to size it to your router table because it may be different from mine. But I'm cutting a 12-inch square base for this jig. I actually think I should have made this wider, and I'll explain later why that would have been smart. To keep the jig in place, I'll be using this miter bar knob clamp thingy, and then also these miter bars. I'll have links in the description for these. But I'm cutting 3.5-inch side runners. These are just to span the gap from the clamp to the edges of the jig, just to help keep the thing squared up. I'm drilling a 3/4-inch hole for the router bit, just so there's a little bit of extra space around the 1/2-inch bit that I'll be using. I also need a 3/8-inch hole for the miter slot clamp that I mentioned before. Next step is adding the miter slot dados in this base on the top side, so I have a fence that can move back and forth on it. Now it's time to start on the fence, and the first thing I have to do is rip out a 2-inch bottom piece. 2-inch just because that's all the room I could spare, and then I need a 5-inch fence piece that'll attach to that. And you can see here how they're going to attach together and move, but you probably also see the problem I mentioned earlier about making this wider, because the miter clamps probably should have been, well, I should have had 2 and put them on the side of the jig so I would have more room to move the fence back and forth. I also could have made the fence a lot bigger, therefore making it more stable and safer to use. So just a tip if you make one. Now I have to cut out the face plate, which is going to match the size of the fence face. And the purpose of this is not only to make it replaceable if it gets damaged, but also to accommodate different bit sizes. Here you get a better picture at how the knob can actually get in the way of the fence, but it did still work for me anyway. Now I have to cut out the initial slot here, and this is just the usual pass-through slot where the bit is always passing through as you're cutting out the box joints on whatever board. But now I have to slide this over left by 1 inch, and it's 1 inch because I'm using a 1/2-inch router bit, so it's double that. And now I have to cut out the slot for the key. This way you'll have the first slot and then a 1/2-inch space and then your 1/2-inch key next to that. Some of you may have already noticed the mistake I made here. I almost glued the whole thing together, so I quickly took off the face and then glued the key just to the face there. So make sure you don't make the same mistake, but I did catch this just in time. After the first test, the pieces were a little too tight where I don't think I could get glue in there. So I micro adjusted this by just bumping over the base on the table a little bit and giving it another go. And that's the nice thing about this jig versus a table saw jig, is this one can be adjusted slightly.